Thanks for coming, everyone. I just want to start by acknowledging that the land that we meet on is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and we pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Welcome, everyone, to the third event of our Future of Mobility series with RAA, InsurTech Australia and Arup. I'm super excited to have everyone here tonight. Can I just get a show of hands who's been to Stone and Chalk or Lot 14 before? Oh, okay. Gosh, amazing. I don't need to do the full spiel then. These are the types of events and activities that we love to run in this space to really connect people across areas of emerging tech. We've got our 3 floors of all of our startups that live above us. There's about 250 people in this building, and the precinct is growing too. I think we've just hit about 1,500 people precinct-wide at the moment, which is really exciting, really great to see the startup community growing. So I'm going to hand straight over to Tom. I don't think we need too much more of an introduction, and enjoy. This is a super interactive session as well, so we'd really love you to get involved. You've got some cards in front of you as well. There might be some global shapers in the room tonight as well who are going to be walking around and asking some questions, so we'd love your input. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much. Can you hear me? Yeah, good. Hi, I'm Tom Griffiths. I'm the CEO of RA Insurance, and it's my pleasure to be here tonight to welcome you all to our event tonight. It's the third in our series for the future of mobility, and we're, from an RA point of view, delighted to collaborate with Arup, InsurTech Australia and Stone and Chalk in running these events. So it's great to be here. As South Australia's largest general lines insurer, these sort of events are really important to us. It helps us imagine the future needs of our members and the South Australian community and make sure that the products that we develop and deliver stay relevant in the market. So these are really important, and we're looking forward to tonight's discussion and seeing what we learn. It's, as I said, the third event. It's the final event, and it's the topic tonight is on access versus ownership. It's a really important topic for RAA. I think most of you would know our history is all built around the motor vehicle and built around private ownership of motor vehicles. So any transition or disruption in the market towards an access-based model would have significant impact on our business, to say the least. So really interested in all conversations around this, but obviously particularly tonight. With the esteemed panel we have formed, lots of knowledge and experience, and I think there'll be a great discussion tonight about what the potential possibilities might be, as well as the risks moving to an access-based mobility economy versus ownership. After the panel's finished, we're also going to hear from Simone Doster, who's the CEO of InsurTech Australia, and she's going to share a few insights about the organisation and what it's happening more broadly, so that will be excellent as well. I think I can tell. I say this often because it probably happens to me a bit too much, but I've lost everyone already, so I'm going to move on without further ado. I'll hand over tonight to the MC, Daniel Conley, and we'll kick things off with the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Tom. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Awesome. Welcome. Thanks for the introduction. My name's Dan. I'm going to be your humble moderator tonight. It is indeed an esteemed panel, so I'm very excited and I'm very grateful for everyone that's made it out tonight. The weather's not amazing, but yeah, we've all taken times out of our week to be here tonight for what I agree, Tom, will be a very interesting and important discussion around the future of mobility. So as Tom said, this is the third and final event of this series. We've had 2 events to date. The first one was around the future of mobility and what that means for the city. And I think sometimes we come to events like these when we're talking about future mobility or future industries in general, and we can sometimes expect a conversation that's very technology-centric. And by all means, we did talk a lot about technology that night, but it was, for me, really interesting to see that conversation gravitate towards themes like social equity and sustainability and what these changes in these systems actually mean for the broader city outcomes that we're seeking for Adelaide and South Australia. The second event was not that long ago. It was 3 weeks ago, and we talked about electrification and decarbonisation. Transport's South Australia's largest emitting sector currently. We've seen some really great progress in renewable energy. We've got batteries, plenty of things that we're really proud of as a state. And I think the consensus from that last discussion is that transport really is this next frontier of decarbonisation for Adelaide and South Australia. So a really exciting space as we watch technologies change over the next 10 to 20 years. Tonight we're talking about ownership versus access. I think we're starting to see this shift in so many industries and sectors now. It's products as a service rather than ownership of products. And so we're going to explore that in the context of mobility tonight. As always, we don't like to give too much away, but we do like to engage the audience as much as we can in these conversations. So I'm not going to talk to the topic, and I'm going to let our expert panel do that. But before we do, we're really keen to gauge the room. Mike, if you wouldn't mind flicking over to the first question that we've got. So the way we like to do these is we pull up this Mentimeter, and we really want to get a sense of what everyone's thinking when they think about ownership versus access. So there's a QR code up on the screen, and there's QR codes scattered around the room, but you should be able to just scan that QR code with your phone. It'll take you to this website. And the question we'd like to ask is, other than people accessing instead of owning cars, we often think about car ownership when we talk about mobility, and when we think about when we talk about ownership versus access, we think about Ubers and on-demand transport. Putting that aside, what else will change in an access-based mobility world? Now, this doesn't have to be technology. This can be anything. This can be user preferences. This can be policy. This can be the types of people that use the types of modes. We're already seeing up there Uber popping up, and that's probably one of the examples that we're most familiar with when we think about how mobility's changed over the last 10 years. Less cars. Infrastructure will need to change. The systems that sit around transport, whether or not that be policy, which is up there. We've got words like bicycle and climate mechanics, so the skills that we need to service the mobility sector will need to change. Lifestyle will change. Air quality will change through electrification and lower carbon technologies. We're seeing the words environment up there, public transport, and traffic congestion and mobility as a service. I could reel off examples all night, but I think the message here is that there's a lot that we think is going to change as mobility shifts from an ownership-based system to an access-based system. So I'd like to kick this over to our panellists to start the night. We might go, so I've got Andrew, Charisse and Tom, who are actually conveniently lined up in alphabetical order. So I might start with Andrew being A. But Andrew, I'd love to know firstly a bit about your background, what you do, and then I suppose what's the contribution you're making? How do you fit into this future mobility sort of ownership versus access transition?
Yep, thanks for that. So my name's Andrew, and I'm the founder of Behave and Save. And Behave and Save is an alliteration on behave on the roads while you're driving and save lives and money in the process. So fundamentally, our aim is to leverage technology to improve the awareness or driver behavioural awareness and reduce the barriers for entry for insurers that are looking to offer new and innovative car insurance products. And these so we've established an all-inclusive vehicle telematics platform that enables insurers to more easily deploy new and innovative usage and behavioural-based comprehensive car insurances. Now, these usage-based and behavioural-based car insurances, if you haven't heard of them in the past, usage-based insurance, UBI, is essentially insurance, comprehensive car insurance, but based around how much you drive your car. So the less you drive, the less risk you are, the less you pay. And then you have behavioural-based insurance, which takes into consideration certain factors around your drive, more specific to your driving behaviour, so your acceleration, your braking and so forth when you're driving and your cornering. And these are used to produce a score that your insurer then uses to produce or come up with your monthly policy and give you discounts and incentives based on to incentivise you to drive a little bit better. So these new and innovative, and where I'm going with all of this, so these new and innovative products are really centred around personalisation. So at the moment when you take out a comprehensive car insurance policy, it's really uses the cross-subsidisation model, which factors in your demographics and the vehicle as well. And essentially you have good drivers paying for bad in some ways. What these new insurances allow insurers to do is to really come up with policies that are more fitting to the driver. So in the instance of what we're talking about here, we're looking at an economy where you have drivers driving for Uber, driving for all these short-term trips and all these car sharing and vehicle ownership, vehicle sharing methodologies and modes of transport, and moving away from currently what they do today, which is that comprehensive insurance where they're linked to their vehicle. And I think this gives the industry, the insurers, as well as all the platform providers like Uber and all the vehicle sharing platforms, an opportunity to bundle in insurance and not only provide comprehensive insurance as an owner for the vehicle itself, but it gives them the opportunity to leverage or allow the driver to establish a personalised driver score, if you will, and carry that around with them, and then their insurance and their premium and so forth, regardless of what type of vehicle they drive, gives them the opportunity to leverage that. That's then applied for their premium, however much they pay for whatever type of vehicle they're in. So it really allows them to diversify and move away from this fixed comprehensive car insurance model. And to me, access versus ownership is really, from my perspective, is a conduit to enable that with insurers more than anything else.
Thanks so much, Andrew. And Cherise, straight to you, similar question. Please introduce yourself. A is obviously at the forefront of many technologies and shifts, including insurance, but many more. We'd love to hear how all of that fits into this ownership versus access topic.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. My role is in the insurance part of the business, and I'm helping our management team to be clear about what our strategy is and think about what innovation we might need to do to be successful today as a business, but also to be successful into the future. But I'm really proud to be part of an organisation where we are actually testing some of these new mobility as a service models. We've tested car subscription programs, we've tested car sharing programs, we've also tested carpooling programs, some of which you may have used before, and I certainly see more of those types of models appearing into the future. I think what's important for me is actually the customer experience that goes along with those things. How do we make it really easy for people to transition to a new future where not everybody owns a car, or perhaps not everybody owns a second or a third car in their home? And we've had lots of learnings so far, and I know the team are thinking about actually how do we think about moving people more holistically from A to B, and how do we do that in a really seamless way? And that could be helping people plan their journeys from, if I'm here tonight and I want to go home, how do we help people do that using maybe a really easy to use app that gives them directions around how to walk 20 steps to the closest bus stop, and which bus do I catch, and actually which stop do I then get off of, and where do I walk then to get home. So to make that process of planning, booking and paying for integrated trip a lot more seamless and easy. So that's definitely a space that RAA will be playing in the future. There's obviously insurance implications that come with that, and Tom nodded to that earlier too, around insurance is not something that will be top of mind for people in this new access world. It won't be like when you buy a car and you think about, I have to buy my insurance to make sure I'm covered. It won't even be part of your consideration set actually, because it'll all be bundled into the trip that you purchase. So that's something that we're thinking about as well.
Awesome, and I'm sure you could go on with about 10 other exciting emerging applications that are coming out of RAA at this very moment. Tom, over to you, please.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tom. I am a strategic transport planner at Arrow. I've recently relocated to Adelaide from London about 6 months ago, and I guess I'm a bit of an odd one out on this panel. Great though it is to be here, because I don't know a huge amount about insurance, but I have spent my career working around demand and capacity in its various forms. So I started out in my career working on the London congestion charging scheme. I was one of the first people to work on that. It was already running by the time I got in, but I had lots of involvement in various policy changes around that, which gave me a real insight into the way that drivers respond to the price signals they're getting. And that's a strand that's continued through my career. So I moved into infrastructure planning involving river crossings with tolls applying, again to balance the demand and the capacity. Later on working on airports, again using access charges and thinking about how the mix of options available to customers and the price signals they're receiving affects their behaviour. And overlaying all of that for me is a kind of policy context and a focus on the outcomes that we want. So I believe that these things don't just happen by market forces. And so I'm super excited by the opportunities that this move to as a service of various kinds brings to encourage, and I guess in a similar way to what you have both been saying as well, encourage the right kinds of choices, but perhaps coming at it from a kind of more macro perspective, underpinned by solid policy, and thinking about the kind of outcomes around in the environment, reducing carbon emissions, reducing air quality emissions, increasing city livability by nuancing the choices that people are making on a daily basis because they're looking at the individual price for a specific journey. And I think the level of integration that the providers of services like yourselves will be having, and operators like Ubers and so on already do have, the integration between the operator and the user or the individual driver is so detailed and fine-grained that there's an opportunity to target and hone the price signals that we're sending to consumers about what the external impacts of their travel are and better internalise them, leading to better decisions individually, better outcomes overall. So that's why I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks all. Great overview and really interesting set of skills and backgrounds that we've got. Mike, we might keep moving on the slides if we can. So I think we've got a bit of a flavour of what we're talking about when we talk about this access-based mobility world. I think things as a service sums it up pretty well for me. I think that it's a change in mindset from needing to own a car. Maybe you don't even own a bike. Maybe it's this integrated, how do I get from A to B, and the mode is somewhat irrelevant. That's organised under the hood. That's going to be driven by private sector innovation. I think Tom makes a great point there around there is some coordination of this system that needs to happen, but along the way there's going to be new insurance models that are needed. The whole paradigm around mobility will need to change. The question up on the board, and it's great to see that everyone's already onto it, is accessing mobility over owning the future for South Australia? And we love an even split room. There's nothing more that we love. This is great. We've got 20 people saying yes so far, and we've got 18 people saying no. Oh, the no's have taken over. So most people are just going to get up and walk out because they're like, we don't think this is going to happen. No, this is great. This is awesome. As we're talking, does someone that's perhaps said no want to raise their hand and share with the room what they're thinking? And we'll do the same for yes, by the way. But yeah, who wants to go? I might have to run this over. Excuse me.
I just think South Australia is just too large in terms of its breadth and because we've got a lot of supply chain and logistics as part of our economy, I don't think that would be a bigger piece, in my opinion.
Yeah, so there's just some parts of our city that are so low density, so far out that we can talk about having shuttle buses and we can talk about these exciting new scooters and share bikes, but there are going to be some places that are just hard to reach fundamentally. Thank you very much. Great point. Yeah. Sir?
So adding on to that, yes, I agree that Australia has a very big landmass, and although there are already access mobility is some similar features like Uber to get you around, I think. Generally, the cost would be very high because if people want to move around to travel far distance, and it's not just something and if we're talking about renting cars to people, it's not like electric scooters around the city. It's more because you have to make sure that people will respond. You have to make sure that people will be. Just do it.
Oh, I'm handing out pens to everyone. That's my fault.
You have to make sure that people would take responsibility of the product you rent to them.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I think it's a really great point. I think these things are exciting to talk about, and we can look to overseas cities that are leading the way and implementing really exciting new models, but there's going to be contextual challenges that exist in every case, and these are shared systems, right? It's challenging. You've got to put your faith in the system and in other people. Who voted yes and would like to share something with the room? Don't all chuck your hands up at once. Yeah, Ben, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, so talking about the yes perspective for me, is we can look at it as in what's here and now, but then being a father and thinking of my children and thinking of the future, what future do I want for my children? And also think of utilisation of assets. So if we've got assets that are just sitting there, I'd rather see them used for benefit for the wider community, which then lowers costs for all of us, which then has greater economic benefit for all South Australians.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ben. I think the no's made a solid case, though. No one really wanted to jump in on that one too quickly. Sir, now here we go.
On the yes side, before moving to Adelaide 5 years ago, I lived in Switzerland for 8 years, didn't have a car the first 6 years. Every train station had a bunch of mobility cars, every car park in supermarkets, and so it was so easy to use and much cheaper, and it's just second nature for the Swiss to use it. And yes, they've got a more compact country than us, but I think I'm sure there's plenty of other examples. That's one that served me very well for 6 years.
Thank you. That's such a great observation. And an example that I like to refer to is Amsterdam with cycling, right? Everyone always says Adelaide's just not a cycling city in the way that Amsterdam is. But back in the 1970s, the cities were exactly the same. Like, it was car-based. It wasn't embedded in the culture. They didn't have the infrastructure, and they just chose to implement that. The Yes team does win by 2 votes on this one. I'd like to hear, does anyone want to jump in? Does anyone want to run with this straight off the bat? Charisse, go for it. Thank you very much.
So RAA did some...
Before you go, could I just say, please answer this question, but could also extend that a little bit. What are the sort of implications of this? I think similar to the thoughts that we've been hearing in the room. What does this sort of mean?
Probably got some information around who the leaders of any change may be. So our latest society and behaviours research shows that 7 out of 10 of our compatriots, is that the right word, are really wedded to their car. People love their cars here in Adelaide. We love the flexibility. We don't love our public transport system. So the reality is it's going to be hard to shift people away to access models, but the people that are likely to lead the charge, we're thinking of the people that have been using our car subscription and car share pilot programs, and that's the younger demographic, so young men 18 to 34. 30% of them don't have a licence. 2 times greater usage of public transport than the rest of the population, 2.5 times greater usage of micromobility and shared mobility services than the rest of the population. Digital natives, so if you make the experience really great, they're probably going to be there if they can save some money too. I feel like they'll lead the charge, and that might be the cohort that we need to target to move towards these access-based models.
And it's always that curve, isn't it? You've got the early adopters, the people that are willing to jump in and be experimental, and then these systems start to embed themselves and become more... I think about my parents, like they wouldn't have used Uber for 3 or 4 years after I was using it. So I completely understand that. Andrew?
Being from Melbourne.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Is that right? So being from Melbourne, I'm happy to tell you how to run your transport system. I'm going to go with the yeses, just for the majority. No, but look, I agree in part with what Charisse was saying. I think, look, there's a market for everything at the end of the day. Will it dominate and be the majority? I don't think so. I think we're just too ingrained in the way we use our vehicles and around convenience and having it there when we need it. But I think there is definitely a market for it, like we've seen with everything else that's come that's new and flashy. You've got the new demographics, the younger generation, that brand loyalty doesn't really mean as much to them as what it did to us and our parents. So they're willing to sell off their loyalty and effectively move it and shop it around based on them providing what they perceive to be the best outcome for them. But I think in any case, whether you're talking about Adelaide or the wider community, change is coming in many different shapes and sizes, whether you're talking about vehicle sharing or car sharing. But I think this is an opportunity, again, to really touch on that personalisation aspects, because there are people that are going to want to go down this path, and the system needs to change, and it needs to innovate and adopt the technologies that it needs to in order to be able to accommodate them, because even if it's a minority at 20%, you're talking about a significant amount of people. So you need to be able to cater for both in this new generation, which will probably end up being the majority at some stage. So again, my point is that it's coming whether you like it or not. There's pretty split up there. So there's enough up there to tell you that you need to start implementing and using technology a little bit better, because it's coming.
Votes. There's some smart people in the room that are holding their votes until they've heard the panel's opinion. I see how it works. That's all right.
It's because I said yes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, don't take that one personally, but I did see that tick over to a very small majority there. No, not at all. Thanks, Andrew. Great insights. Tom, over to you. You've been in South Australia for 6 months. Thoughts?
Yeah, so as a new arrival, I think I echo the sentiments of the room in a way. Like, I think it is the future. But I think the future might come quite slowly. I'm 43 for just another couple of weeks, and until I moved to this country 6 months ago, I'd lived my entire life entirely happily without ever owning a car. I had a fantastic life in London, very mobile, and I guess I was much more of a sharer then. I used buses, tubes, I sometimes used an Uber. Occasionally, if I had a longer trip to do, I would rent a car. I never owned one, and it was totally fine. I got here, within about 2 months of arriving here, I was like, I need a car. I need a good car. And I also agree with some of the comments from the audience as well. I'm quite attached to it. I love it. It works really well here. But I think that's a reflection of the fact that this city is designed around cars. I don't think it's about the car per se. I just like, without a car here, life's quite inconvenient, frankly. I can't get to where I need to get to. There's very few places that it works for. My car is an awesome solution to the challenges that, in a way, this city presents. Don't get me wrong, I love this city, but it does present some different challenges from London. It's the swings and roundabouts. So that's why I think it's a slow yes from me. Implications-wise, I think it's already happening, right? Uber is a thing, and so mobility as a service is with us already. I know we're talking about here about when it grows, but one of the things that really gives me pause about the implications of this for city outcomes is data from London. So London is a city, as I've just been saying, really, with excellent transport links. You can get anywhere by bus or by tube, if you're prepared to put in a few minutes walking as well. Following the introduction of Uber, for the first time in about 10 years, the declining rate of car use in London reversed, and there was an uptick. And that corresponded with a downtick in bus use, which had been growing up until that point. So I'm not really here to pass judgment on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but the observation I'd make is that happened without any real policy will. It just happened because that's what the market forces determined, like everyone voted with their feet, and totally understandably. But I think the implications of this for us is if we have an interest in shaping the future of the city, which I personally think we should, then we have a stake in setting out the policy that ensures that these things, as they come in, are operated in a way that maximises benefits. There's loads of ways that we can do that. We can cut carbon by reducing vehicle kilometres travelled, can reduce the rates of accidents. We could be making sure that certain areas are much more pleasant to cycle and walk in or just be in by directing traffic away from them and so on. One little further anecdote, if I've got a moment. The rate of rat running across residential streets in London has approximately doubled in the last 10 years, and that date is very neatly correlated with the arrival of not the first iPhone, but the second iPhone, which had GPS in it, because suddenly everybody had a sat-nav in their pocket. And that sat-nav knew more than they did. So instead of following the signs, I'm going to go down the main road and then reverse on myself, the sat-nav would tell them, oh, you can just cut down there. So these technology changes have real-world implications for people. That means someone who used to live on quite a quiet street now has twice the amount of vehicles going down past their front lawn. Well, there's not really many front lawns in London, but past their bins, past where their kids might play. There's some very real-world things, and I think there's a chance to work with those outcomes, provided we put in the legwork, see them coming to an extent, put in the legwork.
Interesting that I think the Infrastructure SA 20-year plans that was written 2020 said that by 2031 our traffic will increase by another 25%. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to live in a city that's filled with cars and has got no parks and no greenery. So I think in some respects we'll actually have to change the way that we move. Otherwise we will bear the consequences of that, as London has been doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the point that you touched on, where you've come to Adelaide in Australia and you've purchased yourself a car, we talk about all the car sharing providers, but there's also the peer-to-peer where you've got your car sitting in the garage every second day of the year, so why not lend it out to your neighbour and become a provider in your own? So it opens the way up to that as well.
So interesting. I love to reference, in California, they did a study on Uber, and it basically showed that about 30% of the time an Uber's empty. So an Uber driver's dropped off the passenger and they're driving with an empty Uber to pick up the next passenger. So if you think about, if we talk about autonomous vehicles, it still ages away, let's say, but how many more cars do we need on the road just to satisfy the exact same amount of people going from A to B? Like, you're already going an extra 30, 40% just to satisfy the same transport demand without increasing that at all. So I think it's 27-27, so I get to cast the deciding vote. That was a battleground, by the way. That was like 1-1. That was going back and forth. Not that I don't want everyone here, of course, focus on what the very interesting panellists are saying. It's a yes from me, but yeah, I think these unintended consequences are really important to think about, definitely. Okay, Mike, what's next? That's it for the screens. This is why we gave everyone cards. The third and final question that we're going to dive into are some of the key benefits and risks that we see with the ownership versus access transition. So we'd very much like everyone to share some of their thoughts on the pieces of paper that were provided. You can write on the back of your cards. There's 3 questions. The first question, please list one key benefit of an access-based mobility system. Question number 2, please list one key challenge or risk of an access-based mobility system. And then question number 3, what you would like to see in an access-based mobility future. Okay, thanks everyone for that. So I'm going to pass this question straight over to our panel. So I might ask each of our panellists to answer these 3 questions. There you go. Does anyone want to go first? Sharice is straight into it. I love it.
Otherwise, these men take over. So I'm going to go the climate angle. I think I'm going to go the climate angle for a benefit. We know 3 in 5 of our members are really concerned about what impact their personal transport choices are actually having on the environment. And we're certainly seeing lots of people that want to own an electric vehicle. Anecdotally, they're using as a service mobility models to test it out and see what they really think and see if they can overcome things like range anxiety and how do I charge this thing and do they really go as fast as people say they do when you take off at the lights, or those sort of things. But it's a bit of a conundrum for me because I wonder how many people actually will move from no climate impact producing mobility methods like walking and cycling and mentally think, you know what, I'll just buy an EV because they're really good for the environment. And then suddenly actually you've had the reverse impact. So I want to say climate, but that's me just wishing it really, I think. Yeah.
I'm happy to jump in. So I'm going to answer this from an insurance perspective. So a key benefit that I would like to see, I think, is a larger focus on personalised products from an insurance perspective, and that real personalisation, that fairer personalisation on how we deliver insurance based around how drivers actually drive on the road and the behaviours they portray. I think the key challenge with that, in essence, is the time that it takes for this kind of change to filter through the system, and really all the respective parties having the patience to really see this through. It's a really big change from where we are today and where we have been for quite some time with comprehensive car insurance. So really just having the time and the effort to really stick that out and allow this adoption to change. And what would I like to see in the future? I would like to see a program from an insurance perspective and I think this really talks to something that RAE could really do because of their capability, not only within as an insurance provider, as a driver education perspective. It really creates a great opportunity to utilise this feedback and this information that we're able to gather from the vehicle about the driver to ingrain these types of programs at a learner level to help shape our drivers, so by the time they get to an age where they turn 18 and they're able to have their own insurance policies, they're not treated so much as risky drivers just because of their age, and it really creates that journey and continuity. So by the time we've got 18-year-olds on the road, we've actually created better drivers, and we've instilled self-regulation. They've got a better understanding of how they're driving on the roads, and their parents have got a better understanding, and they're also included in that self-regulation. And through that self-behaviour and that self-regulation, I think will lead to change in the long term. So I think having that continuity from an educational program and lifting those drivers all the way through the insurance program would be great for the economy in so many ways as well.
Yeah, so in terms of benefits, I think that like any of these prompts and more probably could be potentially benefits of an access-based system, honestly. I think that there's a lot to be gained by making mobility choices on a journey-by-journey basis, rather than once you've got a car, you've got this huge sunk cost asset. And the research that I've seen, and it is a few years old actually, but suggests that people are quite bad at factoring in the total cost of car ownership and use on a per drive basis. So I think people are quite divorced from the actual impact of their journeys, and that's even just on their own pockets. I think they're even more divorced from the impact of their journey on the wider society. So things like climate goals and so on, obviously they are absolutely and thankfully, coming up the agenda. But I think that the opportunity to fine-tune people's awareness of that on a per-trip basis, think, should I scoot this journey or should I drive my Subaru Outback, for example? That's a really positive thing, I think, for that sort of goal. But the challenge stroke risk, I've intimated this already, really, but to me the risk is that this stuff doesn't just happen magically. I don't think there's a perfect alignment between the commercial drivers, frankly, of the entities introducing elements of as-a-service products, like quite reasonably, their goals are not absolutely perfectly aligned with maximising all of these outcomes. Clearly there's a profit element in there that has to be maintained. Clearly we want these things to come in. I'm not trying to argue against that, but I think that the challenge is how we try and harmonise all of those different perspectives to yield the best possible outcomes at a more societal level, or even within a city. And what would I like to see in an access-based mobility future? Yeah, I would just like to see better outcomes for the city, really. Lower emissions, more equity, thinking about access for people who currently can't afford to buy a car because they're very expensive. Maybe they can afford to take a trip or two in the week by a shared platform vehicle. Yeah, so I think that's me.
Awesome. Thank you. That was fantastic. We've got time, so I wanted to leave a little bit more time for questions tonight than we did in the past. We want hands up straight away. Who wants to ask the panellists some questions? And then Simone, we'll hear from you shortly. Anyone got any questions related to any of these topics that they want to ask our panellists? I'm sure the young... Yes, sir. Hey, and I'll bring you the microphone. That's all right. Then the people online can hear as well. Awesome.
Hi, Ronnie. I recently got back from Taipei City, which is also very wide and has U-bikes, City Card, Easy Card. You use it any 7-Eleven, Family Mart, several convenience stores on one city block with high. But my question is about payment options on the run. Adelaide's a 24-hour city now, and I've got inside information they will use crypto.com for crypto payments. And what about PayPal? Just the payment options is my question.
Anyone want to tackle, who's our expert in payment options here on the... I can talk about Bitcoin all day, but I don't know. Anyone want to jump on that? I mean, Tom, I think there's an interesting point here that you make. Technology and the payment technologies that we use is one thing. Tom, you touched on your background there around congestion charging, and Charisse also spoke about how once you introduce these applications or these service offerings, you're almost able to bundle so many of these costs under the hood and better optimise how these costs are shared with users than you've been able to do before. Please feel free to respond to that question any way you see fit, but I guess building on that, what does the future of payments look like in a shared mobility system? Like, what are we incorporating that perhaps hasn't been thought about before, and how does that impact demand?
Have a go.
By all means.
So I think that one of the benefits actually of being in a shared mobility world, and if we've got a system where actually data's really open and access to all of the parties within the ecosystem is free and easy to tap into, and we've got common technology platforms, what that does allow you to do is, I was talking earlier about if I want to move from A to B and I need to use multiple modes of transport to get there, is that if we're all sharing that data, it's really easy to get one view across all the different platforms about the best way to get there, and that potentially also allows for you to be charged one fee for that journey, whether you've travelled via train, tram, bus, Uber or anything else. And I think that helps people understand actually the cost of their movement. Tom said earlier about thinking about the impact of your climate, so you can your impact of, you know what I'm saying. You can also then use that one view around integrated mobility to tell you how much it's cost you climate-wise to move around as well. So I think that gives a bit of flexibility.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about payments in general, and certainly nothing about crypto, but I'm also all for bringing these things under one hood so that you can make so that the system can be optimised on a price basis or by channel, essentially, for behavioural benefits. But I guess your mention of PayPal did just make me also think there is a kind of privacy angle to this, and who's going to own that data, because the kind of information that they're going to have is extremely rich. Just thinking back to my congestion charging days, even around that, there was lots of kind of privacy issues. We used to send photos when people got penalty charges. This is in your car. And sometimes you'd get real concerns from people about can you see who's in the car with me? That kind of thing, because maybe it wasn't someone that was supposed to be there. And, that on a kind of much bigger scale, they don't just know you are in a zone, they're following they're aware of where you've been in the whole city for weeks on end. It makes me think that there certainly needs to be very significant safeguards around how that data is protected and potentially thoughts about who is best to hold it.
I think they've answered it perfectly.
We've got another question up the back. Thank you, panellists. There you go, sir. That should be turning
Thanks, guys.
on. Yep.
I live near McLaren Vale, so I'd say I'd spend 2/3 of my week down there in the beautiful Fleurieu Peninsula. And let's say I've got 2 dogs, I take them to the beach, I've got a child on the way, going to be taking them to sport. How is access going to fulfil my needs that ownership most definitely does?
I could have a crack at answering. I'm not sure that anybody here is saying that it has to. I think it's a model that's potentially coming in. I think we're on the margins, aren't we, as to whether it's coming in, but I think it feels like it's on the way. I don't think anyone's saying that you have to switch to an access-based approach. And when I talk also about things like pricing, I think it's really important to say that I think one of the benefits of an access-based approach is that you can have a lot of nuance about how prices are applied. So in areas where public transport is less prevalent, maybe the prices are a lot lower. In areas where the public transport is much more prevalent and you've got lots of good alternatives, then maybe the prices are a bit higher to encourage you to do those. That's just my sort of 10 cents on it.
I think, Adam, the benefit of the access world is that if you've got the Prado for doing the trips to the beach, and that happens once a fortnight or once a month, and you've got the small car just for doing your smaller drives, you could probably think about getting rid of the Prado and actually using an access model in that scenario to use the vehicle that you need to get the job done. So particularly if you're not using those vehicles very often. So there's definitely an affordability lens there too. Maybe I'm doing some work around the house and I need to clean up the garden this weekend, so actually maybe I access a different type of vehicle that I don't normally have in my driveway to actually do those jobs. So that's a benefit, but it also introduces risk if I put my insurance hat on, because if people are driving vehicles that are unfamiliar to them, that increases the chance of something going wrong in that journey too. So we'll have to think about that from an insurance perspective, how we manage that. But I definitely think there's a benefit there with flexibility to tailor the car for the job that you want to get done.
I agree. Essentially. Look, I think with any of these technologies, in this case car sharing or vehicle sharing, and I think this is more geared toward vehicle sharing than it is car sharing, or ride sharing, sorry. But I think there's not a one-shoe-fits-all approach here. There are going to be circumstances where it just doesn't work. The same way with car insurance, where you've got, and in this mode here, where you're not using your car as much, there's the potential there for a pay per kilometre or your usage-based insurance, in which situation you're only paying for what you're using. And the same thing goes, it's not a one-shoe-fits-all approach. Once you start driving a certain amount, it becomes uneconomical for you, and you're better off just sticking with what you had in the first place. But I think the key here is it's optionality. You've got the option of both, and there might be days where you're on a business trip to Sydney in the middle of the city, and it does become more feasible for you to use a system like that. But the point being that it's there when you need it. In certain circumstances, it's just not worth the effort.
Great. So we've got time for one more question. I'm dying to ask Andrew, which I'll ask afterwards, but after the crypto chat, I want to know because I think the individual insurance model is genius, and I was just wondering if that can be like an NFT or something like that. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that later, Andrew. So did you have a question?
Yeah, just a real quick one. I think tonight we're talking about future mobility, and no one's mentioned autonomous vehicles yet. And so I hear the conversation about ride sharing and insurance. Hypothetically, let's say my toaster can drive itself somewhere.
Go for it.
But from an insurance point of view, how does that work? This is going to happen. It might not be 5 years away, but maybe 10 years away. That's got to be part of the system. The Prado that's sitting in the garage that can then autonomously go and pick someone up and take them to the beach with their dogs in the back without them touching the steering wheel. That's all.
So I think it's very valid. I'm not one for autonomous vehicles. It just scares the crap out of me, and I'm going to be honest, especially if it's your toaster making the decisions. But But look, I think you're seeing, I don't know if you've heard, but even over in America, Tesla are talking about providing their own insurance for their own vehicles. So they will have all the underwriting capability and so forth and actuary data to be able to factor these kinds of things in. It is definitely something that is on the horizon, the same way we've got electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles. We're going to need to accommodate it at some point. Now, whether we do it now, a bit further down the line, the sooner that we start that journey of adoption and understanding what's involved and how we're going to integrate that into our society and our community, the better off we are. But it's absolutely, you're right, it's something we need to factor in.
A long way away though, I think. I think we heard from Ariella Health got the first event. She was going to be here tonight, but I don't think she made it. But she was talking about things that blew my mind slightly, like the autonomous vehicles that go around the city streets actually driving in the same path ruin the road infrastructure. And how do you deal with that and what does that look like? I think from an insurance perspective, we're seeing better and great capability in terms of the functionality within our vehicles now. So eventually it will come, but it's such a really long way away. I don't think anybody's really got their head around it yet. And even when you look to the US where they have actually done some trials, bad things happen and then they roll back the trials or it's stop, we need to just take a pause for a minute. So I think we've got a little way away to get our head around that.
Yeah, not from an insurance perspective, but just based on my experience of my adaptive cruise control in my vehicle, I think I'd rather drive your toaster.
We've got a few more minutes. I was just keen to know if anyone's got, doesn't have to be all three of those points up there, but one of the points of the three that they'd like to share with the room. Key risk that you see, key challenge that you see, what would you like to see, what's your vision for the future? Surely we've got one up here, yeah.
Key benefit that we were discussing is that if we see the use of electric vehicles being important in the future, we know that we've only got enough raw materials for about 1 in 4 people to own an electric car. And so that sort of necessitates access models if only 1 in 4 people can own an electric vehicle. So if that's deemed something important, I think a benefit of an access-based system is that electric vehicles could actually be the vehicle of choice for most people, not only just 1 in 4 or the one richest out of 4.
I've seen this young lady at 4 events this year and she says something so insightful every time, which is why I gave her the microphone. I just knew that you were going to say something good. Did anyone else want to say anything while we're here? Yep. Super quick.
When you think about the challenge or risk, because I learned the risk management recently in the uni, so I just think about it's possible to think something criminal things happen and how could you avoid something like this?
Yeah, so we have seen some of that in some of the car subscription trials that we have run. It seems to be when there's some new technology or something new available, there's always somebody willing to take advantage of it. Identity management will be really important in this new environment, and that might be a problem for some people because they will be careful about who they give their data to and how that data is looked after. But the reality is we're going to have to think about how we manage people's identity and know that it is actually you that's driving that vehicle. We've been doing some research around car share programs, and probably the other thing that I would talk about is it's not criminal activity, but people don't tend to take care of assets that are not theirs particularly well. And I won't say the car share program, but there's one in France that we've been looking at, and just to give you a bit of a benchmark, if you drive here in South Australia, on average you'll have a claimable accident about once every 6 or 7 years. This city in France, their car share program actually has, across their whole fleet, 6% claims every month for accidents more than $500. So they've got a fleet of 300 vehicles and 6% of them claim every month. Which is pretty horrific, right? And some of that may be cultural, it may be the design of that city, really narrow streets, etc. And we didn't see quite that experience in our previous car subscription models where we provided insurance for, but that's something that we will all collectively have to think about, because we will all bear the cost of that if people don't take care of these vehicles, because we'll all pay for that in the premium.
I would love to jump in on that one, given that we really come from a vehicle telematics capability more than anything else. So effectively we're plugging a device into the vehicle. So all vehicles have, think of it like a USB port that interfaces with all the computers and all the information traversed going back and forward in the car. And that's also reflected in your driving behaviour. So that data is relayed to us live via the mobile network as you're driving around. These are the kinds of technologies that can help us better understand what's happening and keep us informed as to when events like this are happening, because above and beyond just insurance, this telematics capability have a raft of additional features that we can gauge and take from the car and use that information to present it back that really complement vehicle security. If a car is moving when it shouldn't be, you'll be notified. There's capabilities there to then instantly share the location of the vehicle with the police so they can go and apprehend the vehicle while it's on the move, while you're laying in bed. And there's collision detection where if the car does something based on physics that it should not be able to do, it thinks it's been in an accident. So it records all of the 10 seconds prior, 10 seconds after, and then we can put that into a 3D model and remodel what's actually happened with the vehicle. So in addition to just providing behavioural insurance and taking the behavioural driver data off the car, we also have access to every single thing that car is doing, how it's moving, how fast it's going, the angle it's on, the type of road that it's on. So that gives us more insight into what's actually happening. So if there is something wrong with the vehicle, we'll know.
Nice. Tom, anything to add on that final question? Any just closing remarks generally?
I just think that's another great example of how diverse the potential benefits of this move are, really. The fact that you can get granular insights into the behaviour of an individual driver, and then you can price and you can influence them accordingly. We've never had that before, not in a kind of total way. It's a policeman standing by the side of the road, isn't it? Chance of whether they catch you or not. But this is something completely new and potentially game-changing of a way of directly impacting on driver behaviour to make it safer, like in the moment. Not about the design of the vehicle, it's about how it's being driven. Yep. And to me, that's quite profound.
Awesome. Everyone, I want us to hold our round of applause for the panel because we're going to hear from Simone from InsurTech Australia, who have been a fantastic supporter and partner of this event series. Simone, would you like to join us up at the lectern to say a few words? We should have some slides of yours. Oh, you don't have a microphone? Yeah, that would help.
I don't necessarily need the slides because I'm sure everyone wants to just chat and have a drink. But yeah, thank you for being here. I'm the CEO of InsurTech Australia. We're a member association. We have 90 InsurTech as part of our startup ecosystem and about 40 corporate partners, and RAA has been a great partner of ours since the beginning. And what we do is really bring together all those startups, help them build the ecosystem. We want it to be world leading and we want to really improve the insurance experience. We've all had insurance experiences and there's a lot of room for improvement. So how can we take friction out of it? How can we embed these new technologies? And how can we bring that startup thinking and those technologies to the insurance and the insurers? So we work right across the value chain, general insurance, life insurance, from distribution right through to claims. And some of the things we do, so we do have a member who's in the NFT space, so they're building a Web3 insurer. They're launching soon, so there's lots of things happening. We have members around kind of risk modelling and AI and all those sorts of technologies, and they're really using all the benefits of the cloud and data and how they can really connect people. And it's a lot about collaboration because insurance is a team sport and we need to really bring people together. So it's using different technologies that are generally much cheaper and more efficient and much more real time. And yeah, so there's some of the things we do. We run events across all of the country, take our InsurTechs global. We're off to Vegas in a month to see what the world's doing, and it'll be really interesting. We've got some of our partners here from Riask who'll be coming with us. Yeah, so thank you very much and looking forward to chat to everyone later.
Thanks so much, Simone. Everyone was laughing at me with my NFT insurance idea, but I'm glad that there's someone doing it out there. They've got Andrew to compete with. Everyone, thank you so much. This is an emerging space. We've got emerging technologies. Everything's changing so quickly. There's plenty of experts out there that I assume would concede that they don't know all the answers to these questions yet. We're still trying to figure that out together, which is why conversations like these are so important. So for that reason, thanks for being here. Thank you for participating. Thank you for voting. Please join me in giving our panellists an amazing round of applause. Thank you.